Hello and welcome to the premier Nintendo podcast on all the internet, Super Switch Headz, episode 174. My name is Patrick Knisley.
My name is Matthew Stoner.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest returning to the episode this evening. The one and only DCD, Dan Murphy, has joined the podcast once again.
Hey, thanks for having me back, you guys.
Oh, yeah. What a pleasure to have you on always, DCD.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Dan, DCD, you are here to talk with us today about Embracer Group. What we need to talk about it. What's going on with Embracer Group? Who are they? What are they doing? If you don't know, there's been some big news about them making some acquisitions. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some really unfortunate news coming out of Nintendo of America about contract like testers, QA people there. We'll get into that. We're going to talk about some games that have come out recently, like Kirby's Dream Buffet and Wave Race 64. A bunch of movies. The video game movie Gold Rush, as it was, continues. Gamescom's going to be happening. Lots of stuff to talk about. But before we get into any of that, how's everybody doing this evening? How's your week been?
Pretty good. Yeah. Very strange weekend. I'm not going to lie.
How
had a
strange
couple
was
days. I mean, just, like an amalgam of, it was like some of it was going out and then some of it was staying in. And some of that was because I wanted to relax. And some of that was because I was just sad. You know what I mean? And so it's ups and downs, right? But then I will say the times I did go out and actually like see people this weekend, had a great time. Got to see you this weekend, Patrick.
That's right. Yeah. I also have been having a lot of ups and downs. It's just life, I guess. Right.
Yeah.
But right, I've been doing really good. And then my mom went to the ER, which she's fine. But that was a scare. And then I was doing really good. And then I was reading the news, which was terrible. And I don't recommend it because it just made me feel sad and afraid.
Yeah.
And, so but
games,
yeah,
y'all. We got to talk about games, y'all.
Yeah, I got to show off my Game Jam project at Games Y'all, and that was a lot of fun. And a lot of people came out. Some friends of the podcast, and David himself made it, and some other folks. That
friend of the podcast, David Howe. Monolith Fiji everywhere on the internet.
Yeah,
it was good seeing Rusty Moyer there. Rusty, one of probably the first 10, maybe even like the first 5 guests we had on this podcast. Developer of Astro Duel. And Dig Dog, he was there talking about a new project he has coming up. I don't know if he's ready to announce it yet, so I'm not going to talk about it here. But that was really great to see some.
Maybe we'll have him back.
I'd love to have him back. Yeah, for sure. What about you, Matt?
I did a show, a PowerPoint show at Barrel of Fun called Pints and PowerPoints, where you get 5 minutes to talk about any subject. And I, of course, needed to talk about restaurant brands. So I did a less than 5 minute presentation about Chuck E. Cheese and how its delivery only brand called Pasquale's is just Chuck E. Cheese. And talked about some of the lore.
The lore?
Yeah. I talked about lore. No joke. Because Chuck of Chuck E. Cheese fame, Charles Entertainment Cheese, was born an orphan. And that's why he never had birthdays growing up. So that's why he celebrates birthdays all across the country.
Right. If there was a drinking game where you took a shot every time Matt says lore on the podcast, you would be drunk every single episode.
You're welcome.
Yeah. No, I love it. What about you, Dan? How was your weekend?
It was good. My wife and I checked out a new restaurant on Friday, and then I kind of just relaxed. I hung out with my dog. I brought him to the beach, and aside from that, nothing really else.
Oh yeah,
at all. It was just nice and relaxing.
What was the restaurant called? You ready to give them the Switch Headz bump?
Yep.
Chop Tank.
If you're in wait, you live in DC, right? That's
yeah.
If you live in the DC area, check out Chop Tank. Yeah, did it suck? Was it good?
It was great.
There you go.
I'll have them give you a stipend for that.
Cool. Moving on. We have some shout outs from our Discord server. Some folks that made comments about our last episode. The episode was about Splatoon 3. None of the comments were, but we were having a big discussion about playing in docked versus handheld, and us not understanding people that play docked only, including sometimes guest Karuseta who said that they finally have let their son play in handheld due to some extenuating circumstances. But that's a win for us. I feel like.
Absolutely. I think that's the first time Kuroseta has used a Switch in handheld mode.
But once he actually explained the reasoning why, I was like, oh, okay, that's what I needed to know. He nobody else uses the TV. They have 2 TVs or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
I still I sit there with the TV off playing in handheld mode.
Yeah.
It just feels good.
I like to lay down and be like this.
Yeah.
You guys are wild. I like to sit in a chair and look at a giant screen.
The Huge 27 said, oh, damn, big shout out to the Horse the Band. Shout out. That's one of their favorite bands ever. I still don't know who the Horse is. It Horse the Band? Well, how do you say what is it?
Horse the Band.
Horse the Band.
AVK brought up Horse the Band last week, and I guess it really caught the Huge 27 off guard.
All right, I'll check it out.
He's not going to. A Ron Howard voice. He didn't.
I do like new music, so I'll check it out. Other Dylan said they had just started listening to the podcast, but because we talked about the most dangerous place we play our Switch, the most dangerous place they've played is on the couch because heart disease is the silent killer. And
that's true.
That is true.
Yeah.
Got to get some exercise, folks.
Yeah. All right. So we'd love to hear from you if you're listening to this episode and have a comment on anything we talk about. We appreciate it if you send us a note, join the Discord and post it there would be great. Or, tell a friend about the podcast, leave a 5-star review somewhere, share it on Reddit. And remember to like and subscribe on YouTube too. We appreciate it.
Yes, please.
And we got a lot of gaming news and rumors to talk about. We're going to start off with some sad, upsetting news. Kotaku had a big article about sexual harassment for testers at Nintendo, in particular contract testers who work for not directly work for Nintendo. What's the name of the company? I forget what it's called.
Aerotech?
Aerotech.
Yeah.
This is a long article, and I highly recommend everybody go out and read it because this is the kind of thing we need to be aware of. And but essentially, there are some people who were contractors, and they're facing sexual harassment from full-time employees at Nintendo who they kind of have to be nice to because they want to also be full-time, and that situation just seems toxic right there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But also some of the things that they were subjected to just suck. If any of I think somebody said this, I think it was David, I'll let you say it. Like if any of these people are still there, that's terrible. After this
and I mean, I think, Doug Bowser's already made a statement, which I don't even know was meant to be a public statement. I think it was
internal.
It was an internal memo. So somebody's kind of, Nintendo's got a, someone on the inside that's kind of bringing all this stuff out to the press. Right. I think, obviously I think that, that they need to take action, and it doesn't matter how long somebody like this has been around. I think that, there is gotta be a 3 strikes policy for like inappropriate shit in work chats. You know what I mean? Like you just a lot of it was like somebody being real gross on chat, talking about, Genshin Impact characters that are like underage, and, Vaporeon being the most bangable Pokemon or something like that. It was really just gross, just stuff you're not supposed to talk about at work, right? Especially when it's Nintendo, you don't want to talk about that kind of stuff. And so I think that, that just needs to be dealt with. I mean, there's also like some cases of stalking. And then, they talk a lot about in this article about the Christmas party, right? I think a lot of people almost felt pressured to be in relationships with full-time Nintendo employees in order to get into the Christmas party. And when you hear stuff like that, it's like, man, contractors just like don't need that pressure on obviously like no one should have that pressure to date anybody else, right? At work. And, there need to be rules about that. But also, I mean, like a way you can help avoid situations like that when you're hearing about this a lot is, contractors just need to be treated the same as full-time employees, and it doesn't matter where you started working, you're still working at Nintendo. And I think that you should be getting all the perks of being a full-time employee.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like that's the climate of these, that's the climate of being a contracted employee, right? Like when you when you are hired as a contractor at these places, you're always going to sign a contract that basically says, I have no employee rights. And you have to basically, wash the floor with a toothbrush to make your way into the company and just do the dog shit things. It really sucks. And especially when it's less frequent now, but with these stories of more and more of like the frat culture and all of these places coming out, it's like, man, you just feel for these contracted employees so much,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I was a little spoiled. I was a contractor at a job that I worked at for probably about 3 years or so. And I think really the only thing that differentiated me from any of the other employees was healthcare. You know what I mean? Like it didn't come with healthcare, but that was like, Obamacare was a thing at the time. Right. And so it's like, I mean, it still is, right. And so it's like, so I signed up for that, and obviously taxes, you have to do your own taxes at the end of the year and all that kind of stuff. But I think like, I just think that that isn't, it's not that hard. You know what I mean? Like it's not, I just don't understand. Like you can allow people into the cafeteria. You know what I mean? You can have them over at the fucking Christmas party, get a bigger venue if you need to, if you're like worried about too many people being there. It's like stuff like that. You need to have like a very inviting culture. And this sexual harassment at the workplace is obviously a no-brainer. Like these people need to be dealt with and let go of, if not yet. So,
right.
Yeah.
Terrible stuff.
All right. Hard to move on. I think it's hard to transition to now. We'll talk about fun video game stuff, but we're doing it.
Well, how about this for a transition? The Pokemon World Championships happened, and surely someone got COVID there.
We'll take bad news into good news or whatever. Yeah. Or I don't know if anybody here cares, but yeah, they made at the Pokemon World Championships, they made a couple of new Pokemon Scarlet and Violet like trailers, which shows, I guess, some new, Pokemon, some new items, some stuff like that. Stuff that I don't pretend to know a whole lot about or care a whole lot about. But I think the one thing that I thought was kind of interesting is we all expected that these Pokemon they show you riding around on are the legendaries, but now I'm kind of confused because they've showed off sort of Cyclizar, right? One of the main focuses, which is sort of a earlier evolution of those. So I'm kind of confused. Can somebody who knows a little more about Pokemon explain this or no?
Well, I didn't watch the trailer, so I'm not really sure what that's from.
Yeah.
But so is that like an Eevee thing where it's like maybe it's like depending on how you evolve it, it's a different Pokemon?
Yeah, I think whichever game you have, right?
Interesting.
Presumably, it's not like they've shown that or made that clear. I think it just maybe means that early on in the game you're riding around on a gray one, and then it will change over time to be
a more
colorful. Yeah. I don't know. Somebody out there who knows Pokemon, explain it to us.
We're sorry.
I can't help you guys. I'm sorry.
Good stuff, though.
Yeah. There's more info for Pokemon fans to dig into out there, so go check it out if you're into it.
You guys just did a Pokemon episode 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Look, we limped our way to the
a 30-minute event. That's it.
Well, you guys didn't watch 18 hours of the Pokemon World Championships on Twitch?
No, absolutely not.
But one other piece of news, and this is kind of Nintendo's back to putting out these NSO game trials in a way that we can't really talk about them because they announce them after we record and then they end before our next episode. But the Pokken Tournament DX was once again, I think it's previously been a game trial, but I think because of this, World Championship, they made it free for NSO members again, and there's a sale going on through the end of the month. So that's additional Pokemon news that's happened.
Good game. Pokken Tournament.
Yeah. Now this next one, I think maybe a couple of y'all can tell if this is a good game. Kirby's Dream Buffet is, out now. Doesn't have the highest Metacritic score, but that's not surprising, I
Ooh,
guess.
what's it at on Metacritic?
63.
Oh, really?
It's not terrible, I guess.
That's a lot lower than I
thought it
You
would have been
figured
way
it
feel like
higher.
it should be.
Yeah.
Well, explain, because you two have played it, right?
Yeah. Dan, what do you think about this game?
I love it. It's like a mashup of Fall Guys, Monkey Ball, and Kirby all in one.
Yeah.
It's like you kind of race to the end as Kirby. You pick up fruits and power ups and jump over gaps, and then you also go into like a Mario Kart battle style arena after your race.
Mhm.
And you kind of have these like funky monkey ball mechanics. It's like it takes like 8 minutes to do a round, and it's just fun.
Yeah, it's great. Super fast paced, silly gameplay. It is more like Fall Guys than I thought it was going to be. I was like, because when I first saw it, I was like, man, that looks kind of like Fall Guys, but I'm sure it's its own thing. And then I played it and I'm like, no, this is pretty close to Fall Guys. You know, it's just like 4-player Fall Guys, basically. But you're right. It does have those monkey ball mechanics. It's kind of a mashup between like Monkey Race and Monkey Fight, like the mini games from Super Monkey Ball, kind of like thrown into one. But yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a pretty shallow experience. Like it's really only super fun if you play online. And even then the online can be a little jank sometimes. Like the frame rate dips a good bit sometimes when you're playing online. Not all the time, but it's not uncommon. And then, you know, it's pretty shallow, but there's a lot of unlockables and there's a lot of like skins and levels you can get to. And for a $15 game, that's about as cheap as they come for Nintendo games. So
I mean, I've spent more money on dumber shit.
Yeah. 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 It's great stuff. It's definitely worth checking out, especially if you want something that's kind of a shallow, like just silly experience you can play while you're watching something on TV or something. It's a great game for that. So, and I will say it's the only Kirby game that makes me cuss.
Also this past week, Wave Race 64 released on NSO for expansion pack subscribers on the N64 app. I actually haven't had a chance to pick this back up. I think the only time I ever played Wave Race 64 was, I rented it once or twice, and I think I just stared at the water and then I took it back. Like it's such good water physics, right? Isn't that what it's like? Especially for the time, but I think you were even saying, David, still they hold up. I need to fire it back up and see.
I think so. Yeah. If you like the Wave stuff, friend of the show and recent Embracer Group employee now, I guess, MVG, did a video on like kind of like how the waves work in Wave Race. It was really fascinating to see kind of like a breakdown of kind of how that tech works. But yeah, dude, Wave Race 64. Did you guys play it like since it has come out?
I haven't played it on NSO. No.
Yeah, I just played it because I got my N64 controller for Switch. Just came in the mail like a month ago, so I'm like playing every game with it. But yeah, it actually holds up better than most games on NSO.
Yeah, I agree. It holds up incredibly well. It's still a very unique racer. Just like having to kind of fight against the waves as you're kind of like going through stuff. It's like there hasn't been anything like it since, other than Wave Race Blue Storm for the GameCube, right? And even then, it's like this game is almost like a tighter experience than that game. Yeah, it's great stuff. It's definitely, if you haven't tried it out or if you've never played this game before, this is a must try, even if you're not really into racing games, just because of how unique an experience it is.
Yeah, it's cool. It was my first N64 game too.
And all the Kawasaki branding is still in it, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they added it back
interesting.
in. I think they took it out for the Wii U release. It was like patched out
on on the virtual console.
Yeah, on the virtual console, but now it's all back. So they must have struck some deal with Kawasaki. Yeah,
I did hear that the Japanese version replaced Fanta advertisements, though. That were in the game,
yeah,
apparently.
Well, I've always said fuck Fanta. So
Fanta's actually is the only drink that makes me cuss.
Good stuff. Some not notorious, that's the wrong word. Some data miners that we talk about a lot, including Oatmeal Dome, have been looking at information about Splatoon 3, and in particular the netcode. It sounds like Splatoon 3 is going to be using sort of a new server system that Nintendo has. The previous one was called NEX, and this one's called NPLN. And I don't know a lot about this. A few games have used it, right?
Is this the one that they started rolling out with Monster Hunter Rise?
Hunter Rise, yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently Pokemon Legends Arceus have used it. Those are the two games that we know of that have used it.
I think they've been moving a lot of games over to this new server because you guys know that like Nin server bot or whatever that like is on Twitter that talks about when games are getting updated.
Oh yeah,
on Twitter. It just kind of tracks when games are getting updates, and it's gone through like hundreds of games. Just recently, it's been going in batches. So I think Nintendo's been moving a lot of games over to this new server. They've been down for server maintenance or whatever, right? So this is definitely one of the few that's moving over. Still peer-to-peer though. It's not dedicated servers yet, but
with 8 people maybe should be, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
They apparently also said that they found some evidence of like using some sort of upscaling tech for through the of AMDs, right?
Yep. This is using FSR 1.0, which was also used by Switch Sports. And also the Steam Deck has FSR 1.0 built in at like the UI level. So it's like you can kind of toggle it on and off. It's a little different. There's two kinds of FSR. This is kind of the bad one. I mean, it's not bad. It's just not as good as FSR 2.0, which uses more like, I think it's called temporal upscaling, but it's basically more like, machine learning AI enabled upscaling. This is kind of just integer upscaling. So it just kind of is the most basic upscaling you can do. Right. But at least it's better than not having it, I think. I'd be surprised. I feel like this is probably more to do with keeping steady frame rates than it is making it really like crisp resolution wise in the game. And I've made DCD yawn with my with my technical description.
It's time zone issue.
Big time zone issue.
We'll move fast for you.
He can handle it.
He can stay awake.
It's 9:05 over here, guys.
It's been reported that Nintendo is going to be reducing the box size of the Switch. By 20%. Now, I think what this means really is that, if you've seen the OLED boxes, they are smaller than the previous Switch boxes. So it probably means they're just going to standardize their boxes. And this is probably in response to trying to deal with costs, right? A way to cut costs. You pack more Switches on a boat, on a truck, on whatever.
Do you think this is going to finally solve climate change?
This is what's going to do it. Yeah. Yep. Or all those heat waves.
Congratulations.
In China, gone.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you, Reggie.
And then, we got the July NPD to talk about. So the NPD is U.S. sales numbers for video games. They track a lot of the spending in the U.S. And when it comes to Nintendo, it's always important to remember Nintendo does not share their digital information. So this is just physical when it comes to anything Nintendo. But of note to me, or things I thought were interesting, Multiverses is the best-selling game in the U.S. in July of 2022. Which
isn't it free?
It's free, but you can pay for like a founders pack, I think is probably where they're getting the money, but also you can buy characters and stuff. Right. So I don't know how that is calculated exactly, but that's the highest selling game. And then I think it's interesting to see that Xenoblade 3 was the number 4 best selling game. And this is all platforms we're talking about right now. Despite not including digital, which I imagine would be some people buying that game digitally, at least. Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a disappointment for Nintendo? Number 3 or number 4 rather, instead of number 1.
They know what it really is. We don't.
Because
they have the digital sales numbers. So
no, I mean, I think a lot of people have shifted towards buying digital more than physical. If it's number 4, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah. I don't know, like where like Xenoblade 2 or Definitive Edition
looks like
ranked.
Xenoblade 2 is 2.17 million units. I guess this chart doesn't tell us how many it's sold.
Yeah. We know it's topping Nintendo sales though in the US, so it's the number one.
Like on the eShop, you mean?
Well, I was just talking about physical in the US.
Oh, okay, right.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know about. And of note for Donnie, and I think he shared this information, Digimon Survive is the 9th best selling game on the Nintendo platform. So
wow.
There you go.
Donnie. Do you think Digimon Survive is going to top Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl for sales lifetime?
Yes. Head to head. It's going to be a close one. Too early to go.
Yeah. We'll see.
No, but that is a good point because, like, I think Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are like way up there because they always do like a year ending chart, right? Like the year ending in July, and that's like number 4, and that's not including digital. So,
crazy stuff.
Crazy indeed.
Patrick hates Pokemon so much it makes him go, ugh.
It does. When a remake of a game like that is the 4th best-selling game of the last year, that makes me upset. I guess the other games on that list make me upset too, but whatever.
What else makes you upset?
Madden 22, Call of Duty. I'm calling you out. Call of Duty.
Hey, I hear
upset. It's the only Call of Duty that makes me cuss. Call of Duty Vanguard.
Okay.
I hear Madden 22 is actually pretty good.
Good for them. I just
cite your sources.
Cat Bailey, IGN's own Cat Bailey, gave it a good review. Enemy of the show, Cat Bailey.
Yeah.
No, we love Cat Bailey.
Yeah. Anything from that y'all want to talk about, or should we move on?
Yeah, I'm good.
Movies, more video game movies, right? What do we got? Gravity Rush. Some Sega IP. Is what's going on? Is just like any video game, do you think could get a movie at this point?
Yeah. No, we're getting into the territory now of like the early 2000s where they were just pumping out. It was like Blood Rain, Postal, like all of these like random IPs that they could get for like dirt cheap and make for even cheaper. You know what I mean? And so it kind of feels like we're getting towards that again right now. But I mean, hey, Gravity Rush is a really cool game and a really cool world, and I think would make a great movie. And Sony Pictures is putting this out. So, I think Gravity Rush could be really cool. The Sega games you were talking about, Space Channel 5 and Comic Zone, are getting movie adaptations, which are not the two IPs from Sega that you would think when you hear that they're making more Sega movies. But yeah, I mean, those will be interesting as well. But it's like, yeah, it does kind of feel like we're starting to just kind of grasp at any IP.
I think it's like the comic book one where like, you hear of some movie and you're like, oh, that looks like a cool movie. It's based on a comic book. I didn't even know that. You know what I mean? Like,
I just found out that The Last of Us is getting a TV show today, and I was blown away by that.
Yeah, some footage just came out for that, right?
Yeah. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah. Hopefully it's good. I'm sure it will be. But
what Pedro Pascal?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and the girl who was like the queen of something in Game of Thrones.
Mormont.
Yeah, she was a Mormont. Yeah. Speaking of, you guys watch that Game of Thrones prequel pilot? I started it. I was very bored 10 minutes in. But I hear there's lots of gore and sex. I just did not get to that part yet.
Game of Thrones is back, baby.
Yeah.
Moving on. This is news that you might know and we don't, but Gamescom is happening. Gamescom's a big gaming event that happens in Germany, and it has been like many of these virtual or not fully in person over the last few years, but it is back in person. And there's a big opening night thing with some announcements and stuff, and there might be some other stuff over the course of Gamescom, but that's already happened. So we'll talk about it next week. Or we're in that weird limbo of things that happen between recording and release for us. So It's cool to see Gamescom back. Let's see. I'm interested to see what kind of announcements we have. If there were,
I only got one comment about this, which is Microsoft has an entire booth and they talk about some of their games that they're going to be focusing on. And Halo is not one of them, which tells me that Halo's in a rough spot right now.
They should have called that game Halo Finite.
Got him, dude.
It's only one Halo.
You got Halo.
343 Industries. Yeah, they're showing off the new Expanse Telltale game. So I'm very excited about that as a huge fan of that show. And as a fan of the Telltale games, I think that's a great fit. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We will not be talking about this next week, as we will be essentially off next week.
Oh, that's true.
We have a special episode recorded for you guys next week.
Good point.
I'm sure we'll touch base on some of the important stuff we heard whenever we're back.
Yeah, that's right.
Before we move on, there's another game that's happening at Gamescom. So if you're a wrestling fan, All Elite Wrestling, or AEW, is showcasing more footage of their Fight Forever game. They've been partnering with Ukes, who worked closely with a lot of the old N64 wrestling games. So I'm excited to maybe see a return to form in some wrestling video games out there in AEW. Fight Forever.
Yeah, I'm hearing really good stuff about this game from rumblings on the internet right now. So hopefully it lives up to the hype.
All right. Well, our next news item we'll just maybe gloss over real quickly because we're going to talk about it in our main topic, and that's that Embracer Group has acquired a lot of different companies.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to go over that in great detail in just a little bit and kind of talk about what that is, what all these companies are, and who Embracer Group is, and all of that, right?
Yeah, I think the big ones that they acquired would be like limited run games, Tatsujin, and Lord of the Rings. Like the entire rights to the entirety of the Lord of the Rings like series and the Hobbit series now all belongs to Embracer Group.
That's so crazy.
It's absolutely insane, especially after Amazon spent like $1 billion on this, this show and like getting the rights for it and getting it made and put out. It's like all of a sudden it's like they just grabbed it. Total insanity.
Yeah. And their wording in their press release is weird because it covers, as you said, Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, and specifically the medium, or I think they say transmedia a lot in their press release. So it covers movies, video games, board games, merchandising, theme parks, and stage productions related to Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, but not. They don't say like television shows or books, obviously, or graphic novels or comics or anything like that. Just those specific things.
Right.
So I think if I would speculate at all, we're going to see tons of Lord of the Rings merch. Thermoses and flasks and other drinking things.
Well, that dashes my hopes of putting on my off-Broadway production of The Third Age, the musical. We'll see.
All right. Well, we're going to dig into this a lot after this short break. All right. We are back, and we are talking about Embracer Group, who just made a number of acquisitions and with a single day. Right.
Yeah.
It was like one day and they announced like 4 or 5. And also you might be saying, what is Embracer Group? Well, we're going to talk about that because it's not a household name. It's not the name that you might be familiar with them, but you might not know Embracer Group. Right. So I think we're going to kind of just spend some time talking about this acquisition, about what Embracer Group is, what they own now and what they also already owned. And probably a little bit about acquisitions, even though we've done an episode on that, but it's continues to happen. So we'll probably cover that more. Right.
Yeah. I think we need to talk about Embracer Group because for me, what is so fascinating about them is, I don't think that you would be, I think it would be completely fair not to know who they are, because I feel like it's really only over the past year that they've kind of skyrocketed into one of the biggest holding companies for video game publishers in the world. I think that if you look at I saw a kind of a chart breakdown of like all the companies that own, whenever all the big Activision stuff was going on and Microsoft bought Blizzard and what's the first one that they
Activision.
Yeah. Before that, they got like Bethesda, and they there's all these companies, and you're looking at it, and it's like, oh, Microsoft owns this many, Sony owns this many, and then it shows Embracer Group, and Embracer Group like completely shadows the other two, right? They just in the sheer number of intellectual property that they own at this point, it's kind of come out of nowhere. So yeah, I kind of just wanted to have a conversation and just make heads and tails of it myself on the show today, because it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I think I have the chart pulled up. So if you're watching the YouTube video, you're seeing it right now. Because it shows like Tencent and like Ubisoft and Take-Two and Microsoft and EA and like all of their companies, publishers, developers. So you see companies like EA. There's like DICE. On PopCap and Tencent is all of Miniclip and all of their corporations, and then Embracers. Yeah, it's just so many.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we could start with what is Embracer and how we got here. What a lot of people might know them as THQ Nordic, right? Like that might be the more familiar name, but there's a little bit of a history, right? Does anybody feel comfortable walking us through that?
I can talk about it just very briefly. Just Perfect. A brief history of the CEO. We love the CEOs here. Super Switch Headz. We love talking about CEOs generally. Just one, Chris Meledandre's son. But the CEO of Embracer Group, his name is Lars Wingfors. And just a little bit about him. He got into this industry because he was buying and selling comic books. And then from there started buying and selling video games. And so he opened up his own retail store, which he later sold. And eventually he made lots of money from all of these sales and acquisitions. And he learned some of the business part. And so what he brings to like Embracer is kind of that business mentality of acquiring and seeing value in intellectual properties and used things in order to make things better, in order to make profit out of those things, video games, comics, etc. And so he, in 2011, opened up Nordic Games. So we might know THQ Nordic. But when THQ, when they basically put all their money into like Red Faction that didn't do well and a bunch of other games, and they sold up a lot of their IPs, Lars bought a significant portion of THQ, including the brand THQ. So Nordic Games, which is maybe a familiar brand if you're in or around a Nordic country, THQ is a much recognizable brand. So since buying the IP, they kind of formed this THQ Nordic so that it's more noticeable when you slap a logo on a game.
Yeah, I mean, THQ, you used to work for THQ, right?
I did.
Matt?
Yep.
Yeah, back in the day. They kind of went under, was it like 2015? Something like that, I feel like, is when they kind of shuttered. But they used to be one of the biggest names in games until they just went belly up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they used to be huge, and they used to own like tons of stuff. They had significant licensed games. So if you ever played any Disney game in the Xbox 360 era, Ratatouille, WALL-E, it's all THQ.
Okay, well, so that gives us a little bit of a history, right? And then at some point, they changed their name to Embracer, or is Embracer a parent company for THQ Nordic?
That's exactly it. Yeah, so Embracer. There's many Embracer names. I'm not going to get into there's a Embracer Freeform, which is all of the different 6 companies are part of this Freeform group. But generally, Embracer Group is the top level, and then THQ.
That's like the alphabet to the Google. Or
that's
whatever,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Yeah.
What about like previous to this acquisition? Because maybe we'll talk about the acquisition in a minute. But like, what are notable IP or games that Embracer Group already owns? Maybe is there anything that y'all can think of?
I think Gearbox is the only one I know of, and that was pretty recent. I think that was like March.
Yeah, that was pretty recent. I mean, I'm looking at some of this. We've got a list here in our notes of like 18 publishers that they own at the moment. So some of these big ones are going to be, you got Aspire, who recently was in the news because Aspire was working. I mean, Aspire does all the ports of old Star Wars games, right? And they were kind of given the reins to do this Knights of the Old Republic remake of the original Knights of the Old Republic game. That recently got shuttered, right? I think that it was not looking good, and that got moved to another studio within Embracer Group, within the Embracer Group family, which they haven't really said who it is, but a lot of people are thinking that it is what are they fucking called? They do a lot of Switch ports, like Impossible ports. Saber Interactive, which is also owned by Embracer, right? So you've got Inspire there. Like you said, you have Gearbox, Deep Silver, who does the Metro games and Saints Row. Saints Row is coming out, I think, this weekend, the new Saints Row game. Who else on here? 3D Realms, Duke Nukem developers.
I think like a lot of these are names that if you're really into video game business and stuff. And I think that's what's fascinating to me about this is that it's like a ton of stuff, but maybe like a bunch of stuff that's maybe a little more niche.
Right.
Does that make sense? And I think that's what's really interesting.
I think a big one that they ended up getting recently was not publishers, but development houses is Crystal Dynamics, IDOS, right? All of the those Western Square Enix developers were basically sold off to Embracer, right? So that includes, the Tomb Raider franchises, Deus Ex, all that kind of stuff, right? So what you kind of see here with Embracer Group and what THQ Nordic has been doing as well is getting old kind of inert IP or stuff that hasn't had any movement for a while, repackaging them and re-releasing them, right? And I think, to me, a lot of the reason that this has been possible is because of the Nintendo Switch, right? I think that the Nintendo Switch has proven itself to be a platform where everyone just expects legacy titles that have not seen release in decades to get random ports, right? Like all of a sudden you're seeing, fucking it's games you haven't even thought of in decades, like suddenly get released on the Switch and find really good success, right? And so I think THQ Nordic and past that, Embracer Group has taken advantage of that and have actually done a lot of releases. They did the SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom is a great example of that. Like that's a game from the GameCube that no one would ever think would get like a re-release in modern times, but they did, and it did pretty well because the overhead of developing a port like that is like not that high. It's pretty low,
Yeah. Yeah. The way I've been trying to think of something like how to explain to understand their influence, and in their recent press release, like Embracer says they want to create leading positions in the AA, A, and indie segments of the gaming market. So it's not AAA, it's not the top, but it's everything and everywhere and everything in between there. And the best metaphor I could think of is our grocery stores. So like if you're going to like an HEB or a Publix in Florida, there you might be going there for one thing, like tissues or toilet paper, but you also instead of going to the grocery store like an HEB, you might go to like a Dollar General, or you might go to a gas station to get something. That's what
Walgreens or something.
Exactly. That's what Embracer is. Embracer wants to be everything. Have games out everywhere, wherever you get your games, up until all the way you go to your AAA.
Mm-hmm. Now, that bringing back the AA game sounds pretty good to me, right? Like that doesn't sound like a bad thing. I feel like for so long, for the past like 10 years or so, we've really just had indies and then massive budget AAA. And there hasn't been a ton of that kind of like medium zone, right? I mean, I feel like it's kind of the same with Hollywood too. It's like, I think all the movies that come out are either tiny micro budget indies or like big Marvel movies. And we're losing a lot of like the glory days of like the 70s in Hollywood was like putting out these kind of like mid budget, like, not the biggest things ever, but we just don't see that kind of stuff anymore. So I kind of think it's not a bad idea. What do you think about this, Dan?
I just kind of find it interesting how they spend their money. Right, because you look at all the acquisitions recently, and we brought up Zynga, and that was a $12 billion acquisition. I looked up like the market cap amongst like the video game companies, and Embracer Group is 18th with like an $8 billion market cap. So just to, put it in perspective, like Konami is right there with it, 1 billion under. So like you said, they're taking kind of all these small companies that haven't really done anything in a little while and re-releasing them on the Switch with less hardware. And on the spree, they spent about 575 million, which is also surprising getting the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit stuff in that. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah, so
I would imagine that'd be a lot more than that.
I was surprised. I thought they were like, this is going to be this huge acquisition number, but like it seems like they're spending their money really well, and just it seems like all smart investments.
It's kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing, right? It's not like a big blow like buying Activision Blizzard or something like that, but rather just like all these things that they can produce for really cheap and then just make more money than they spend, right?
Yeah.
Rather than taking a big swing.
Right. And I mean, you look at some of the acquisitions this year, it's like we brought up Zynga, and then like Bungie went for 3.6 billion. Like some of these numbers don't even feel real anymore.
No.
Right.
I mean, we say 575 million is nothing, but that's still a lot of money.
Yeah. Using Bungie as an example, like if Bungie was did you say 3 billion?
3.6 billion.
Yeah. So Embracer got the rights to Lord of the Rings cheaper than Bungie.
That doesn't feel real. I'm going to look up the Lord of the Rings deal and see if I feel like that can't have been included in that number, right?
It is. Yeah. So none of the purchase amounts are in these press releases. Right. They don't say them specifically, but in their latest press release, they do say the total amount that they spent, but not how much they spent on each acquisition. So it's like 8.2 billion. What's the Swede currency? Kronos?
Not half of euros, but it's kroners.
Yeah.
So it's roughly just under $1 billion if you do the conversion.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like, it's going to likely amount to 786 million for all of the acquisitions.
That's wild, dude.
So maybe Lord of the Rings, the rights to Lord of the Rings is 300 million of that.
Probably the lion's share of that, right? Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah. And then they also said in their recent press release that they made another big acquisition that they haven't announced, but it would have been in like the top 3 of what they said. So I guess for some legal reasons, they can't say exactly who they bought yet. But do you guys have any idea who that might be?
I have no idea.
I thought limited run games would have been worth a little bit more too.
I think a limited run has probably got to be up there in like, that's got to be in the top 3, right? Of stuff that they bought. I mean, limited run, obviously a lot of people know limited run games through their retail stuff. They do a lot of pressing, like physical releases of indie games and stuff like that. But they also are a development studio in and of themselves, and a publisher by their own right. And they do a lot of publishing. I brought up MVG earlier, who's on the Spawncast, and he's been on this show before. And he developed a engine for limited run games that makes it easier to port older games with modern features such as achievements and stuff like that. And that makes a lot of sense for Embracer to pick up limited run games because of that engine, right? Like that's kind of what they're all about, is re-releasing these old games.
Like Shantae uses that.
Yeah.
That engine. Yeah.
I think Shantae, the Quake remaster that MVG worked on as well. A lot of those games all use that engine. So it definitely makes sense.
I think what is amazing to to look at in all of these press releases that we're getting big business brain, big business heads in this episode, is that they're buying all these companies, but they're allowing the current presidents and the current structure to maintain. And I think that's a fascinating move. They're going to like buy all these companies, see if they're successful, and then 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, then we'll see maybe big or small changes to these companies. Maybe some of them are sold off. Maybe some of them merge together. But for right now, everything stays basically the same. Only the money trickles up to CEO Lars.
To your point earlier, David, about this not sounding like bad if there's more AA games getting made, and to what you're kind of saying now, Matthew, like there's a really great article on The Ringer about all of this, and I think it's in there somewhere. Somebody says, if you're at a studio that's making one game and it fails, the studio closes. But if we own all these companies, we can make 50 games, and so long as some of them are successful, that would be the argument for this, right? I don't necessarily believe that this justifies this kind of stuff, because I think at the end of the day, it's business, and they'll close ones that aren't successful, and the games, they'll push the kind of monetization they want and all that kind of stuff. But that would be the quote unquote, positives of this, kind of what you're hinting at, if they actually let people make what they want and keep their structures.
That means when Stubbs the Zombie comes out, you better buy that game, because we want more Stubbs the Zombie games.
Yeah. I mean, I could take or leave Stubbs the Zombie, but yes, I see your point. And I do agree. This feels like the least evil of all the acquisitions so far, right? Like, I mean, even though it's like a massive amount, right, and it's a huge corporation, I feel like there are a lot of plus sides to this, right? I forget who said this, but somebody brought it up in something I was listening to about how you want to talk about how difficult it is to just license old games when they're all owned by disparate parties. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of people want old games to come back to the forefront and be able to play them again, when they're all kind of under one umbrella that owns all the weird niche games from like the early 2000s. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be a lot easier to secure those rights and actually release them.
When everything is state owned, it can come out. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like, like people, a lot of old games, like people don't even know who owns the rights to them. You know what I mean? You got to like search forever. You got to track it down. All the source code is fucking lost. It just like kind of makes an easier catalog, I suppose. To do that kind of
I
stuff.
think this is maybe why the Lord of the Rings rights were like cheaper than you might expect, because it's wrapped up in all of the movie rights and all the TV rights, and then Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, but not Silmarillion and not the books. And so I think it was cheaper because Embracer Group is taking on some of the ongoing lawsuits that are probably happening today. They're buying some of that litigation.
Did you know that the person who previously owned the transmedia rights to Lord of the Rings was the guy who bought them in the 70s for the animated movies?
Yeah. What's that? Saul Zantz?
Yeah, I think it's Saul Zantz. Yeah,
Ralph Bakshi movies or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was like Middle Earth Enterprises or something, I think they called it. But yeah, it's been in those same hands for forever, and so it's just interesting that it's not, especially after the New Line films and all that stuff. It like took all of that to before anything was ever sold. I just find it fascinating.
So we kind of talked quickly about this most recent round of acquisitions, and we made it pretty clear about Limited Run and Lord of the Rings, but what are some of the other companies that they just picked up, and what do people know what they make?
So someone help me out here, but it's the company that does the like karaoke games or like microphone based games.
That's what's so interesting.
Which one is that?
There's many of them, but they bought the company is called Singtrix.
Right. That's what it is.
So it's this whole technology that they're trying to like, it's like a vocal platform. They're trying to like gamify karaoke as like a technology. And that's part of these acquisitions is they bought Singtrix, their technology. And whatever that turns into a video game, I think Singstrix had lots of involvement, or maybe has some of the patents related to some of the original Guitar Hero releases.
Nice.
Well, they bought Tripwire, which makes Killing Floor, which I just know of because I have a friend who was really obsessed with that years ago. And I think this is my point. These are like, not a lot of these are, household names. They're things that obviously were somewhat successful for a niche. And I think that's one thing that video games can do. We don't always talk about, right? Like, something doesn't have to be the number one seller. So, depending on the size of people that make it and that kind of thing, if you find the right audience for it, it doesn't have to be a household name to be successful. And they're buying all these companies that do that, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Which I think is fascinating and an interesting strategy and scary at the same time,
it seems like all these big acquisitions are a race to the top, but Embracer is going to a race to the middle, like they're racing to the middle and the bottom.
Do you think they're going to be making any other plays? Because it seems like they're not just buying video game IP, but rather platforms, technologies, transmedia, right? Like we talked about with Lord of the Rings, like that. We think about Embracer Group buying Lord of the Rings, and you're like, oh, okay, well, they'll be making a Lord of the Rings game, but they could make an Aragorn movie, or like a Gollum movie or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like they could make all this different kinds of shit. Like, what do you think the future is for Embracer Group? Do you see them like branching out outside of video games, maybe into films or Hollywood or something like that? Or B, do you see them moving into anything else within the gaming space, like hardware? Are we going to see in a big Embracer Group E3 presentation? Like when E3 comes back, like what's the goal, do you guys think, for this company?
I think it's hard to say, but I think what you were saying about let's say an Aragorn movie. Let's say they make an Aragorn movie. Then they have mobile game developers. You're going to see an Aragorn mobile game, and then a AA PlayStation 5 Aragorn game, and then maybe a Aragorn board game, because they also own a board game company too.
Well, big one too, Asmodee, which makes a lot of board games that, if you're into board games, you've heard of, like Catan and Ticket to Ride and stuff like that.
And then you have a limited physical copy, courtesy of Limited Run Games, for all your collectors. So you have you can have one piece of media that you can basically put everywhere because you have a giant conglomerate.
And they own comic book companies too and stuff too.
Oh, yeah, they own Dark Horse.
Yeah, I keep forgetting they fucking own Dark Horse. That's insane.
You can put Aragorn in Dark Horse. That's fine.
They'll put out a comic book or whatever about all, there's so much cross potential there that's a little scary. I don't know what they're doing, but I think they just want to buy companies and make money. That's what they're doing.
I think we need to talk a little bit too about like how they get their money, right? I know I think Mohammed bin Salman, we once again go back to Saudi Arabia, put like $1 billion into Embracer Group. That's something we probably need to talk about. I mean, he's been doing that a lot with a lot of different companies, a lot in the games industry as well. They've got their kind of like cultural grant or whatever that is basically just taxpayer money that they like give out to like rent. They put into the stock market essentially, right? And so I think even the Lars, the CEO of Embracer Group, like talks about it. And he's like, he's a bad guy, but I'll take his fucking money. Basically, is what it came down to, right? Like, it's surprising to me like that this just like kind of came out of nowhere. And it's not like it's not all like pocket change, right? I just wonder where all the financing is coming from.
Well, they have two lead investors. One of them is Savvy Gaming Group, and the other is, I've never heard of this, but Canada Pension Plan Investment Board. So I'd imagine that that's where most of it's coming from, because if you look at their stocks, they're actually worth only $6 a share. And anybody that has like that kind of market cap around them usually is way more per share. So people aren't investing in Embracer Group right now at all.
So Savvy is Saudi Arabia's gaming.
Oh, is
Okay,
it?
that's what that
So
is.
that's where it comes from.
Yeah, it's their investment group.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not the public that's buying into them. It has to just be those.
It's the nations of Canada and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it's Canada and Saudi Arabia in unison.
Oh, man.
I mean, what kind of cult of personality do you have to have in order to convince these countries to say, hey, I have this business plan that's going to make you and your business or country billions of dollars?
Well, we should get Lars on the show. You think
Yeah.
he'd talk to us?
We can find out. We'll send him
I'll send him a DM on Twitter.
yeah, or LinkedIn.
Yeah.
$6 a share might be a good investment, though.
Yeah, it's now like the time to jump onto Embracer Group.
Yeah, they're at an all-time low.
Yeah.
David, you as you were talking about all these IPs, how do you think all of these IPs in Embracer Group will find their ways to Game Pass or Sony services?
I mean, I think they just make deals like anybody else, right? I think we've already seen a lot of them, right? You know, I'm sure it's only a matter of time before Saints Row hits Game Pass, right? Like, I don't think that. Also, reviews just came out for that game, and it's not looking super hot. You know, it's like mid to bad, right? Which I don't think anybody was not expecting that. Everybody kind of thought that was going to happen. But I feel like these deals would be made just by anybody else. I don't think that we're going to see any. I mean, I think they're going to be pretty platform agnostic, right? And I'd say that, and I think the Knights of the Old Republic game was supposed to be PlayStation exclusive, right? So, but by that I mean we're not going to be seeing like all Embracer Group games going to one platform. I think it's just whoever gives them the biggest bag, you know, just like it all was before. I think, yeah, the name of the game with them right now is business as usual. We just see the end result of all the money, right? So I can't see that changing. I do wonder who that other big acquisition was that they got. For some reason, I'm thinking Dotemu or Dotemu, or you know what I mean? Who did like, you know, Shredder's Revenge and Windjammers and stuff.
Streets of Rage 4. Yeah.
They do a lot of old games, right? Or maybe one of these companies like who is it that puts out like the you know, the Mega Man collections, and they're doing the Cowabunga collection and stuff like that. I think like one of those companies makes a lot of sense. Like M2, who you know, do all the like the Castlevania collection, stuff like that.
Digital Eclipse.
Yeah, Digital Eclipse makes a ton of sense. So yeah, I gotta think it's one of those.
Is there anything specific about Embracer Group that y'all want to make sure we talk about, or do you think there's any sort of just otherwise maybe just any sort of, you know, we already talked all about these large scale acquisitions that are happening in the industry, but they continue to happen, and they seem to be happening more rapidly and you know, more often. Is there any thoughts on that? How do we feel about this? Not good, right?
I don't really know how to think. Like I said at the beginning of this, I just kind of needed to wrap my head around it. That's what the majority of this conversation was for me, right? It's kind of hard to see where it's going to go, but it's certainly like a different approach to acquisitions that than we've seen for the rest of this year, which has been filled with them, right? And so it's kind of fascinating to see, and I think it's like, I don't know, I don't feel bad about it. I'm just kind of like nonplussed. You know what I mean?
I think one takeaway I got out of this is like some of the biggest acquisitions over the last couple of years have been mostly like mobile game invested. So, you know, I don't play mobile games. I don't care about mobile games. But so I just like never thought anything about it, but like clearly that's where the money is and that's where it's involved. And even in this acquisition, I think it's called Deca Games or whatever. Like that one is just strictly all mobile games, and that might be like where they make their money off of this. But I think like just seeing through all these acquisitions, like it's crazy how much money is involved in mobile gaming and microtransactions.
Well, and to that point, I think, you think about like Tencent buying companies and you think about this too, right? And like, if, I don't know, like microtransactions or free to play or games as a service is what somebody at the top of these companies that owns a bunch of other companies wants, is that going to trickle? That's where some of this can get a little bit upsetting as a fan of games. You know what I mean?
But it doesn't seem like that's their MO here. None of the releases that they've done are like that. I feel like it's, maybe some with the mobile games, but it's like at the current time, it seems like they're just repackaging old shit. It doesn't, it seems like it's the bigger publishers. It's like the Microsofts and the EAs and everything that are, and even Sony is like, we're doing all these games as service games. They have like 10 games as service games that they're coming out with over the next year. And it's like, it's always the bigger ones that seem to be doing that monetary stuff. It's like, it almost seems like that's not what their Embracer Group is trying to do. So, I guess that's why they don't feel as evil to me. Right. And they keep releasing stuff that I'm just like nostalgic for.
That's exactly what they're doing. Yeah. They're buying up all these nostalgic properties.
Yeah.
Re-releasing them. And then they're going to measure which ones are successful. And then
maybe we should call it niche-stalgia. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's a great name. I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do, and that's the scary part to me. Is they're spending the billions of dollars. They're getting all these huge investments. It's impossible to have endless growth. And right now they're spending all this money for significant growth, but 5, 6, 7 years, at some point, some of these companies will get sold or disbanded or merged, or people will leave, or old CEOs of Saber or whoever will leave. It's all a matter of time. You can't be successful forever.
And it's probably only a matter of time before they get somebody like Konami or Sega or one of the big ones, and then they're just going to be like all the others, right? And then they'll be shutting down the little studios, and then they'll just go after the big fish. And then it's like, you know what I mean? It's like maybe they just have to work their way up to being truly evil like the other big corporations. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it seems like right now, looking at folks on like the board of directors. Like Lars, the CEO, he owns 28% of all of Embracer, which is a huge controlling stake. Mm-hmm. And they're all investment people, and a few folks from Saber and some other big companies within Embracer.
Yeah, I don't know. We won't know. But, and obviously, like you said, David, it doesn't seem as nefarious, but it's just a little scary to have more things owned by fewer people in general, even if they're theoretically not as evil.
Heard.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like we should, start to wrap this up pretty soon. Is there anything else anybody wants to make sure and mention before we close out this topic? I mean, we've just kind of been having a conversation, so if there's anything else, throw it in now.
They're gonna buy Arby's next.
We'll get our Lord of the Rings meat sandwich.
We have the man flesh.
Well, they did buy Tripwire, who owns Manator, so
there you go.
Well, that'll wrap up this conversation around Embracer Group. If you're listening and you have any comments on anything we said, or you want to put in your 2 cents, definitely reach out to us and send us a note. And we will take another short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the games we've been playing recently. Well, I've been playing a lot more Smash lately, and I've been playing Kingdom Rush Vengeance on my phone, but I also bought Stray on Steam Deck, and I've been playing Stray. I'm not terribly far in, but I wanted something on there that felt good and handheld, but also kind of big, and like nice. Just looks great on the Steam Deck, and it's a lot of fun to play it on there, and it's just fun to meow and all that. It's a good game too. I love games where you play as animals, and it's just super great. I mean, It's also a scary future, but it's great.
Yeah, great game. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
I think that's it for me.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3 for me. 80 hours in. I think I'm on the final boss.
You think or you know?
I don't know.
It could be a psych out.
Have you looked up any guides or anything on this game?
Only to unlock some of the heroes, because there's a series of quests that you have to do in order to unlock some heroes, and there are 200s of side quests, and I didn't know which ones, so I looked it up. So I think I'm at least close to the end. I think I'm 84 hours in, maybe 86.
Xenoblade 3 spoiler talk episode when? DCD, you're invited.
I'm lagging behind the Xeno Heads and the Switch Heads community. I'm in the middle of chapter 4 right now. The game is awesome. I'm addicted to it. I've been playing a ton of that. I have some theories that I want to get into it, but it's like funny because all the areas in Xenoblade 3 are like somewhat familiar. You know, so it's like, it feels like this kind of bizarro fan fiction, like Xenoblade world. Like, cause everything's kind of there, but you're like, oh, this is a little odd. So I'm sure that's going to come to fruition with something towards the end. So I've been loving that. Played a little Kirby's Dream Buffet, which we talked about. And then I picked up a game called Cursed to Golf. It's like this little golfing roguelike. It's an indie game. I'm really bad at it, but it's like, it's definitely fun. Yeah, you just like, you basically have to golf through these obstacle course holes to get out of purgatory.
You're basically in golf hell.
Yeah, you're in golf hell. You actually get struck by lightning and go to hell. So to get out of hell, you got to like beat the 18 holes, and you know, you race against bosses that like just cheat against you and use cards to help yourself out. But yeah, it's super cool. It's fun. I'm gonna keep kind of chipping away at that.
Yeah, I picked that up as well on Steam. And,
oh, nice.
I only played a very small amount of it so far, so I'm looking forward to getting further into it soon. Yeah.
Cool, nice. And that's it for me.
You know, I'll go next. A little bit of that, Curse to Golf, some Wave Race 64. Played through some circuits of that. Just reminded how much I fucking love that game. I think it's such a fantastic game. I think everybody should try it. What else have I been playing? I've been playing this game on Game Boy Advance called Kuru Kuru Kururin. I don't know. I posted about this in the Discord. But Kuru Kuru Kururin was a game that released in Japan and in Europe, but not in the US. And in both of those countries, it was a launch game for the Game Boy Advance. And you'll probably recognize the kind of main character from Smash. I think he's an assist trophy. He kind of is in a little orb thing that has these two very long wings. So it's almost like a bar that kind of extends out. And so basically in the game, the whole thing is top down and you go through these mazes. And in the game, your ship, which is basically this stick, is constantly rotating, right? And so you have to kind of like be patient and wait to go through certain areas. Otherwise, you'll hit the wall. And if you hit the wall 3 times, you die and you have to start over, right? So it's really super basic concept, but it's like really challenging, right? Like I could see it was a great launch game in these countries. I also kind of understand why it didn't come out in the US. Like I think it wouldn't have sold well here. I think we were looking for different kinds of gameplay experiences in our launch lineup in Game Boy Advance, for better or for worse. But I've been emulating that. That's been a blast. I really, really recommend checking out Kuru Kuru Kururin. It's like kind of, it's like a Nintendo classic that just, I feel like nobody has played from the US and is definitely worth checking out. And then, yeah, other than that, just playing Kirby's Dream Buffet here and there whenever I get a chance. I'm really enjoying that game quite a bit. A little bit of NES Remix 2. I started up on that. And then other than that, yeah, I'm still playing Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and I'm playing through that on stream. Currently, I'm still doing that series. I just beat chapter 3, so I actually just fought the Peace Walker in Peace Walker, and so I'm not even really sure what's next. I think there's like 2 more chapters to this game. I'm pretty sure. So either I'll be done with that game this Wednesday or the next one, but I'm trying to do like 1 chapter per stream, and that's been working out pretty well. As long as I don't play like the side missions, because there's so many side missions, and I'm just like, I kind of don't love this game enough to play all the side missions on stream, and I don't want to just like stream this game for like 2 months. So I'm kind of just blasting through the main story. But yeah, that's been a blast as well. Yeah, so great stuff for me. I've been enjoying all those games.
Awesome. Well, that's it then for our episode on the Embracer Group, what they are and all their acquisitions. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, DCD, for coming on and talking to us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. It's always a blast coming on here.
Thanks to MilkyWay.co for doing our website. Thanks to Corduroy for doing our music. If you're looking for me, Patrick online, I am PDYX.
I'm Matthew on Twitter, MATHYOU.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Dan? Where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at DCDM99.
There you go. Simple as that. Simple as pie, as we like to say. If you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Twitter, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram and Facebook. Shoot us a follow on Instagram and Facebook, gang. We're posting art to that Instagram all the time. And then also we got a website, switchheadz.com, and our Discord, which we would love to have you guys join. We'll have a link to that in the description of this podcast, whether watching on YouTube, which you should give us a subscribe on, or on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. That's going to do it for this episode on Embracer Group. What a scary company. We'll be watching their career with great interest. And like we said earlier, folks, we're going to be back next week with a special episode. We're kind of taking a week off from next week. So there will not be any news on next week's episode, but we did record a very special episode for you guys, full of question and answers that we got from the community at large. And so very much looking forward to you guys hearing that Q&A episode. That's going to be a fun one. So make sure you tune in next week right here on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central on switchheadz.com. All right. That's going to do it for the podcast, everybody. You know the drill. We love you. Stay safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Be the best you could be. Fuck the police. And we'll see you next week. We love you. Bye-bye.